the short story behind all the data that I'm about to show you is that essentially, you know, in Jan, Feb, March, there was a huge shock to the property market and to the system, if you like. And there was this, I guess, influx of properties as a result. So there was an oversupply, which meant that prices started to come down a little bit as a result. And as a result of that, it means that you are in a position where the income or the rent that you're receiving from that property is a little bit less. And so the ultimate goal here is to manage your expenses so that you can keep your return on your investment balanced. But I'm just going to go through the charts now because you'll see that it's not all doom and gloom and there is some good news on the horizon. But if you start here, and I'm going to go, hopefully you can see the mouse there on the left-hand side of the page. This is a chart that just shows stats over the last 20 years. And you can see that the percentage in the market of owners with no mortgage, so that purple line, is in decline. So less people own properties with no mortgage because, as that orange line shows, more people in the market who are owning a property have a mortgage. And at the same time, there's more and more private renters, which is that green line. So you're essentially seeing a few trends here, which is obviously people have more debt when they own a property and there's more people who are renting privately. On the right-hand side, it's a good sort of comparison because a lot of those people who bought properties may have bought them with the intent of putting them on Airbnb or having them as short-term rentals. And the great chart that you see on the left here, which is the Airbnb listings coming down about a third over a very short period of time in 2020, because ultimately any international or immigrants or anyone who was coming for tourism suddenly was unable to rent a property. And what happens when you're unable to rent a property? Well, you look for other avenues. So that short-term market shock that you can see there in decline basically turned into long-term rentals, which sat on the market competing with the normal properties that were in the market. On the right-hand side here, you can actually see new bookings through Airbnb, which is quite interesting because you can see it dropped dramatically until about May, and then it started to pick up again. And it's sort of fluctuating a bit as different lockdowns have come in Australia. And just by the way, this is Australian market. So there is some good news in that those bookings are picking up, but if you look through the numbers, it appears to be sort of short-term holiday goers in the domestic market as opposed to those, I guess, people who are coming from overseas. So it's not necessarily new entrants, it's just the same people going around. So what does that mean? There was an additional number of properties in the market. So there's an increase in supply. And on the left chart here where my mouse is, you can see Sydney, and on the right, you see Melbourne. And so what's happened, again, this is over a 20-year horizon, but you can see the vacancy rates in 2020 have just spiked in both Sydney and Melbourne. And again, that is a result of what we just talked about, which is the short term, as well as maybe some of the tenants who are international exiting. So suddenly you just have a larger number of stock. And so the following trend is what happens when you have a larger number of stock is people are competing in a smaller pool of people looking for properties. People are competing. So you can see the number on the left is the percentage increase in rent reductions. So there was a spike of about 1%. On the left is just the larger states, and on the right is the smaller states across Australia. So on the left, you can see, New South Wales obviously spiking quite quickly in the process, but then it's come right back down. Victoria is still spiking, obviously, as a result of their recent lockdown. But you can see that trend's in decline, and you can also see that the spike was sort of 1.2% in rent reductions. And that's where we start to see the silver lining here, is that that number is coming down. So I think I can just see a question coming through, which is the state of the market quite depressed right now? And I think this chart really tells a story here that suggests, yes, there was a big shock earlier in the year, but it started to trail off to the point where actually those reductions in some of the states, and I'm just going to flip to the next page. So if you look here, this is a table from Core Logic, which shows from the last quarter what's been going on, and of course over the last 12 months what's been going on. So if you just look where the mouse is at that quarter column, you can see what is the change in rent. So Sydney and Melbourne, biggest two cities, still sort of battling a little bit with COVID, have had a decrease in rents. But if you look at Brisbane, Adelaide, particularly Perth, and then even if we drop down to Darwin, you can see that those particular places where COVID was perhaps handled quite well and there was less of an ongoing issue, that the percentage in rent increase is actually maintained. So if we go across here to the right, where you look at yields over 12 months, if we just look at the total, it's about 4% dropping to 3.77. So I think the good news here is that that bite, if you like, or that reduction is not, if you like, to the point of, as somebody has correctly asked, is it a depression? I don't think in any way, shape or form the numbers support that. What it supports is that shock to the system where things started to come down is hopefully on its way to playing out, to flattening out again. And in fact, we'll see in the next quarter, hopefully New South Wales and Melbourne, Sydney and Melbourne there, reduce those reductions. And so things should start to get back to normal again. But one thing that's worth mentioning here, and I think it is a really important point, is that those yields there at 3.9, so that's effectively the calculation is the income that you'll receive from your property divided by the cost of owning or holding that property. And so where that is a little bit in decline, and again, if you look at the different cities, it's at different rates in different places, but where that's in decline and you're in a position where the market itself is moving down in terms of rental income, your ability to control that rental price is very low, right? The market's shifting down, rental prices might be coming down a little bit. You can't do much. Maybe you can hold your price up, but that might not have a positive impact for you. But what you really can control in the equation is actually your costs and your expenses related to owning and managing that property. And that's really something that we found in the last 6 months especially, is very attractive to people in the market. Is, I may have been spending a few $1,000s a year on someone managing my property, but actually if I really think about it, for a few hundred, I can actually do it myself, and I'll save my expenses and I'll improve my return on investment. So this number here gets adjusted by how well you control those expenses. I think the net summary of that is obviously supply spiked, prices came down as a result of increased competition, and we're now seeing a little bit of a flattening out, and we believe that your best move is therefore to control the expense side of the equation.